All right, today we're going to take a story you probably think you know, the story of Indian independence, and we're going to flip it on its head. We're going to look at it through a completely different lens, a Marxist one. Because, as you're about to see, when you change the lens, you can radically change the story of history itself. So, let's start with the big question. Was it really just a straightforward battle? India versus Britain? A simple, heroic struggle for freedom? I mean, that's the version we often get, right? But what if the real story was way more complicated? What if there were other forces at play, simmering just beneath the surface?
Okay, let's dive right in. We're going to start peeling back the layers of that simple, heroic story. We're going to look under the hood, so to speak, at the economic engine that, according to this school of thought, was really driving the whole thing.
This slide right here, it basically frames the entire debate in a nutshell. On the left, you've got the story we all know, a whole people rising up against a foreign crown. But look at the right. The Marxist view completely changes the focus. Suddenly, it's not just about nations fighting. It's about classes within those nations. The conflict isn't just political anymore. It's fundamentally economic. So how in the world do historians actually do this? What are the tools they use to see history this way? Let's break down the core framework, the toolkit, if you will, that they apply to the Indian freedom movement. The master key to all of this is a big idea called historical materialism. Seriously, forget about the kings and queens and big political speeches for just a second. This approach says that to really get what's going on in history, you have to look at the economic base of a society. Who owns the stuff and who does the work for them? Everything else, politics, culture, you name it, grows out of that economic foundation. Okay, so how does this actually work when we apply it to India? Let's break it down. First, British rule wasn't just a military occupation. It totally rewired India's economy and plugged it into global capitalism. And in doing so, it created brand new social classes that didn't really exist before. Second, from this viewpoint, the Indian National Congress wasn't a party for all Indians. Nope. It was seen as being led by and for the new Indian capitalist class, the bourgeoisie, who basically wanted to be the new boss. And third, and this is crucial, the movement only became a mass movement when the peasants and workers jumped in. And they weren't just fighting the British, they were also fighting against their own exploitation by Indian landowners and factory owners. Now, you might think all these historians agreed, right? Well, not even close. Even within this Marxist framework, there were some absolutely fierce debates. It was a real intellectual battlefield. So let's meet some of the key thinkers who shaped this whole conversation. The guy who really laid the groundwork for all of this is A.R. Desai. His big argument was pretty radical. He said that before the British, there wasn't really a single Indian identity. It was all a patchwork of local loyalties. It was the new capitalist economy, with its railways connecting the country, its telegraphs, its unified market, that actually created the material conditions for a shared Indian national identity to even exist in the first place. And this slide illustrates Desai's model perfectly. He didn't see nationalism as this big bang. For him, it grew in very distinct phases. It didn't start with the masses in the villages. No way. It began with a tiny Western-educated elite. Then it spread to the new industrialists, then to the urban middle class. And only in the very final phase did it finally reach the massive peasant population. It was a slow percolation, from the top all the way down to the bottom. But not everyone was buying this neat top-down model. Let's turn to our next thinker, R. Palm Dutt. He came in with a much stricter, more critical, what you might call orthodox Marxist take. And he was deeply, deeply skeptical of the very nationalist leadership that Desai was describing. Dutt's central idea is famously known as the betrayal thesis. As this quote shows, he believed that the Congress leadership, and yep, that includes Gandhi, would get really nervous whenever the movement became too radical. When the peasants and workers started threatening the property of the Indian elites. And what would they do? They'd call the whole thing off, effectively betraying the masses to protect their own wallet and their own class interests. But that's a pretty harsh critique, right? Well, not everyone agreed with it. Enter Bipan Chandra, a hugely influential historian who came up with a more sympathetic view, often called left nationalist. He looked at the Congress and saw something much bigger and much more genuine than just a tool for a single class. Chandra borrowed a really interesting concept from an Italian Marxist named Antonio Gramsci. He argued the freedom struggle was a war of position. Think of it less like a direct battle and more like a long, slow-moving chess game. The goal wasn't just to have protests. It was a long-term fight to win the hearts and minds of the people, to slowly dismantle the British claim that they had a right to rule and to build up a whole new vision for India in its place. Okay, this slide right here, this is where it all comes together. This is the intellectual showdown. Just look at the incredible contrasts. For Dutt, the orthodox Marxist, Congress was just a tool for the rich. For Chandra, the left nationalist, it was a genuine movement against imperialism. For Dutt, Gandhi was basically a mascot used to keep the masses in check. For Chandra, he was a brilliant strategist. And the biggest one of all, for Dutt, 1947, was just a transfer of power from one elite group, the British, to another, the Indian bourgeoisie. But for Chandra, it was a genuine national revolution. You see? Same basic toolkit, totally different conclusion.
So it's pretty clear this Marxist lens shows us a lot about the economic forces shaping history. It's a powerful tool. But like any lens, if you look through it too closely, you can develop some pretty big blind spots. So let's take a quick, honest look at some of the major criticisms that have been leveled against this entire approach.
So, two big critiques really pop up again and again. First, and this is a huge one, argued by thinkers like B.R. Ambedkar, is that this relentless focus on class creates a massive blind spot. It often completely ignores the deeper and arguably more powerful reality of caste in shaping Indian society. The second major charge is one of Eurocentrism, basically the accusation that these historians are trying to cram India's incredibly unique history into a pre-made European model of feudalism to capitalism that just doesn't really fit. And that's where we'll leave it. The point of this whole analysis wasn't to tell you the one true story of Indian independence. It was to show that history isn't just a list of facts we memorize, it's an interpretation. And by simply changing the lens you use, in this case, from nation to class, the entire picture can transform right before your eyes, which really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other lenses are we missing, and what other stories are still out there just waiting to be told?